Hello again, everyone. It's me again, Kenta, along with...
Jagger G. I used to run this game a long time ago, eons ago.
Back in the early days of the
Back
Metroid
in
speedrunning community.
ancient, what, like 2014 or something?
Something like that.
And yeah, he's, we were talking to him how do you pronounce this?
Narudare. Narudare.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Abu
were
Dhabi.
speaking to him just a minute ago, and he wanted us to just relay some stuff to you guys.
Yeah, he plays a lot of the Metroid Prime series and other M, of course. So, like, be sure to give him a follow. I think he generally streams on Sundays. So definitely give that a look-see.
Yep.
I think you can just give him the okay to go.
Yep. I think we just ping him ourselves and let him know.
This is actually a really cool category. I really enjoyed this, even more than any percent personally. And it is, as you could see from the estimate, it's a really long category. We're gonna be looking at like a 3:40-ish time tonight. I think he's whittled his time down over the past few weeks, or the past couple months, I guess.
Yeah. Other M's music is reasonably good. It's got a nice title theme. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but to my understanding, the way that it works in this game is it'll show you the items that are in a room after you kill all the enemies in it.
I believe that's the case, yes. I didn't know that for a really long time until someone pointed it out recently on a stream.
Ready for a quick test, Samus?
Oh boy, we have the most condescending tutorial in existence.
Try a charge beam for me.
Yeah, it's kind of long. Luckily, like, there are a lot of long cutscenes in the game, but they're all skipped in the speedrun. After you beat the game once, you actually have the option to skip them on. That'll be fine. You have the option to skip them on any of the future playthroughs on any of the files. Even if you delete the files from the title screen, you can still skip them.
That's good.
Perfect, Samus. All right, stand in the middle of the room.
Why does he literally just trapdoor her?
From there, kick climb to work your way up.
Because it's funny.
Just like that,
the Federation are jerks.
Let's invite some of your pals.
Oh, no, he doesn't need to. Okay.
They're always like activating trapdoors underneath her, or like scraping DNA and cloning like her worst nightmares. They're just all in all.
Yeah, I think we should agree to do our best not to rip on the game too hard, though we may disagree with it.
Yeah, true. Like, it has its problems, but it's a pretty okay game, I guess.
Yeah, the gameplay is not the weak point of Metroid Other M. It's just the stuff that we're not paying attention to in a speedrun.
The nice thing about 100% is you get a lot more of the action. It's mostly concentrated towards the end, kind of similar to Fusion, but throughout the game, there's a lot of pretty slick boss fights and tricks.
I'm kind of interested to see what the final total of everything is, because from what I understand, like, the amount of general pickups is actually relatively low because of the concentration mechanic.
Yeah, they decided to give each E-tank just one missile capacity increase. And really, you don't need a lot of missiles because of the recharge mechanic. They've always pretty much just been padding for just Easter egg hunting, which is pretty much the fun of most of the 100% runs in games.
Sharp-looking charge beam, just the way I like it. Okay, morph ball next. Go ahead and drop some bombs. Okay.
So there were a few optimizations, even in the tutorial. You can sometimes get more dodges from the beams that are fired, and it'll end that sooner. You can whenever this pirate comes up in the tutorial that you're supposed to battle, you can know exactly where he's going to spawn by standing like on the opposite half of the room, and he'll always be in the opposite corner.
Okay. Just as a palette builder, what is your favorite moment from the run that you're looking forward to seeing?
Well, generally the cleanup is my favorite part, but probably more specifically in Sector 1. That has a pretty high concentration of speed boosting and just like various combat mechanics, so that'll be pretty cool.
Alright.
I guess, like, closer towards the beginning, I guess, would be...
Next, how about a missile test?
I guess you get Speed Booster, like, 40 minutes in, and then that's a pretty big jump in gameplay fun, I guess.
Alright.
Things really pick up at that point.
So, is there a full style, like, open cleanup at the end of the game? Because I actually was unaware of that. Yeah. I thought that it gated you the whole time.
It pretty much does in a similar fashion as Metroid Fusion, in which, like, a bunch of doors are locked until the end of the game, and then, like, you have all the abilities and you could just go anywhere. What's gonna happen is he's gonna basically beat the game kind of like any %, but with a few other things that are out of the way later on, and then he'll beat the first final boss, I guess you could say, like complete that story, and then there's kind of an epilogue portion afterwards.
Yeah, and the epilogue is where you fight Phantoon, right?
Yes, and you get to clean up the rest of the sectors and go anywhere you want.
Okay. Just to clue everyone in who don't know, we now don't have access to any of those abilities. The way that it works specifically in Other M is Samus has all of her abilities from Super Metroid for once. She didn't trigger her bag of spilling to just drop them everywhere. Instead, she's choosing not to use them because she does not have permission from Adam. That's a bit of a controversial mechanic, but just let's just make that clear so you guys understand what's going on. And there's going to be various times he's going to be skipping most of the cutscenes, so it might seem a little random, but he's going to be active. Various abilities will be essentially making themselves known to him over time as Adam authorizes them in the story.
Yeah, it's kind of like skip cutscene, and then it'll tell you you can now use plasma beam and super missiles, or something like that. And it kind of explains it towards the beginning of the game, that basically this is mostly just a rescue mission, and you don't want to put the survivors in any danger, so you don't want to be too overpowered in the beginning.
Now, to be clear, that does not explain why you can't turn on the Varia suit, or the grapple beam, or the space jump.
That is easily explained by, it's just that Samus is passive aggressive, and when he says turn off all your abilities, she turns off all her abilities, even the ones that make absolutely no sense to do so. Then she could blame him later on, in retrospect. It's classic psychology.
Alright, I believe this is the first boss. Is there much of a strategy going on here? I know that the general idea is that you just missile it until they freeze a section.
For the most part, this is the case. You could actually opt to do some lethal strikes, wherein you start charging up your beam and then you run into it, and Samus will climb up and shove her cannon into its eyeball and fire it. And that's just as effective, but it's a bit easier and a little bit faster to just missile it.
That makes sense. The command bug is destroyed and the first boss is down.
Now, unfortunately, whenever you want to use missiles, you have to go into first-person mode, and then all your... Like, whenever you're locked on in first-person mode, you'll be firing missiles. So, where was I going with that? So, basically, you can't move around when doing so. That can be mitigated, however, if you go into first-person mode while in the air. You will continue your momentum, like either forward or whatever, or downward in some cases, and you can continue essentially making progress through the game while shooting things.
That's interesting. I was actually unaware of that.
Hopefully that'll come into play later.
Yeah. The entirety of Other M is played with the sideways Wii remote, like you were playing NES Troid pretty much, because Yoshio Sakamoto makes some questionable design decisions, and so they realize that they have no other way to control the missiles other than aiming the thing at the screen, but then you can't move because there's no nunchuck.
I kind of wonder if the designers were passive-aggressive too, because they gave her 3 fire buttons. I don't know. It seems excessive.
I question nothing about this game anymore. It's not worth the effort.
But the movement is pretty fun, and the combat actually gets varied quite a bit. With you'll see he's mostly shooting missiles to kill things. You get your beam powered up later on. You could use that for certain enemies. And then you also get a lot of other weapons. Bombs are pretty effective in some cases. You eventually get screw attack and power bombs, super missiles, and they all have uses against different enemies that really changes things up in the speedrun.
So this is more linear than Fusion, right?
Yes. Yes. Fusion does have 2 alternate paths in the speedrun that unfortunately nobody really bothers to take. But we don't yet know of any sequence breaks in Other M. There is some potential for there to be breaks, but we just haven't found like specific things to let you skip things. Like, there is one instance that we know of to reliably, I guess kind of in air quotes, reliably, it's really hard to do, get out of bounds. But
okay,
we haven't found an application for it yet.
Is that in a specific spot, or is that a generalized trick?
It's in a very specific spot. You essentially, you hit a loading trigger, and you have to optimize your movement so effectively
Samus,
that you get to a room,
right,
enter the door, and run off some ledges, and fall far enough before the floor actually loads.
You to survey Sector 1.
And then you're out of bounds, and you could space jump around. and it's interesting, but we haven't done much with it, unfortunately. We have found other instances, like a lot of other instances, where you just fall through random floors, but we don't quite know how to make that happen.
I don't know if that's a good thing. Like,
it can be. I think there was one instance where that was actually able to skip a scripted encounter.
like that sounds like a bad Metroid 2 select glitch happening kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much.
I'm happy that didn't happen in my run, because it can just happen where like it just spawns a huge wall in your way, or just like drops you in a pit. Not fun.
And unfortunately, the out of bounds in this game is quite a bit different than in the Prime series. You might have heard Prime out of bounds as being described as in an invisible box, but that box usually has some wonky collision and stuff that allow you to navigate, whereas the box in Other M is a kill plane, unfortunately.
Oh, jeez.
So if you don't have space jump by the time you're able to get out of bounds, then it's kind of pointless, unfortunately.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say there's no infinite bomb jumping.
Actually, there is.
Really?
Sort of. It's extremely difficult to keep up. It's like, it's a really tight window to keep the rhythm going, but there are also some oddities about the way bomb jumping works. You can bomb jump up to a maximum height, and that height is set from when you leave the ground. Incidentally, that height increases when you get high jump and well, not high jump, space jump. When you get space jump, I think it basically doubles. So you can bomb jump higher. Unfortunately, at the top is just an invisible ceiling. Although you can technically just bounce against that ceiling infinitely. So you can basically do horizontal bomb jumps in theory, but it's just so impractical by human gameplay that we have theoretical uses for it, but it's not really worth mastering at this point. So there's definitely precedence for sequence breaking and for glitches in the game, but nothing concrete yet.
Something I was curious about: does skipping cutscenes also skip the walking simulator sections of the game?
Unfortunately, no.
That is unfortunate.
I want to say like 2.5 minutes in one particular section.
Just for some context, there will be times where the game just arbitrarily decides Samus needs to be like tense here, and so she just starts walking really, really slowly for no reason.
Yeah, you could sort of optimize it, I guess, by walking in very straight lines and like perfecting your angles, aiming so that you brush your shoulder against things, taking tighter turns, but ultimately it's just slow. I love these guys, actually. And there are quite a few ways to defeat them. You could just like jump on their backs and blow them up with a lethal strike. You can actually, you might have noticed when the fight started, it tried to grab you with its tail. You can get grabbed and actually do some kind of input that counters it, and you grab its tail and fling it up into a wall, and that's really awesome, and I really want to figure out how to get that reliably, but I don't know how yet.
This is a very interesting spiral we're just spinning up slowly.
And later on, those chameleons will die to one super missile. So
Alright.
Really convenient.
Super missiles in this game are like prime super missiles, right?
Yes. They'll take 5 missiles to fire. And
Yeah.
there's a big blast radius. I think it does splash damage. There's some quirk to it. Most notably when dealing with Metroids, that allows you to kill them in fewer hits than normal. I think it is splash damage, it's just kind of confusing.
So is there any special gimmick in the, I believe this is what, the Biosphere?
This is kind of... I believe this is generally based on SR388, perhaps. It's like a lot of these sectors, well, they remind me of Metroid Fusion areas. There's this forest, this jungle sector. Later on, we'll get to this geothermal lava sector, and then an ice frozen over sector. And this one, mostly you'll... Let's see, this might be more heavily focused on combat. Maybe that's not true.
I think that's kind of the whole concept of the game, isn't it?
There's some,
I mean,
like...
it's certainly not a Metroid game about exploration.
Yeah, there's some sections where you gotta basically figure out, like, put together a puzzle and figure out, gather evidence and whatnot.
The pixel hunts?
Yeah, and figuring out, like, who's behind attacks and, like, who sent out the distress signal. And
I mean,
this is, I guess, a plot-heavy sector, mostly.
that's fair. I'm really looking forward to looking for the green blood on the green grass.
And there's a question in chat about whether this is a sequel to Fusion or what. This is actually a prequel. This takes place... I'm not sure if it's immediately before Fusion, but
in terms of the time frame, it's implied to be right after Super Metroid because they supposedly take the samples off of her suit to create the Ridley clone, and it's just like being born when she's here on the bottle ship.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with the lore, for better or for worse. It's just the speedrun tactics I'm not intimately familiar with.
The introduction cutscene actually features the Mother Brain battle. It's actually, it looks pretty good, like cinematically.
Looks like the Rios are giving him a hard time.
These guys are so obnoxious. When you try to target things in first person, it has a tendency to try to distract your targeting, making you target the least important thing within eyesight, unfortunately. So these little flies are just designed to annoy you.
Yeah.
And you destroy the hive, find the Morphball tunnel, and roll through.
One interesting little plot hole in this game is that they supposedly cleaned said like remnants of Ridley and stuff off of her suit to be able to clone him. But at the same time, they show that when she gets knocked out by Adam near the end of the game, her suit goes away when she gets knocked unconscious.
Yeah, that happens. I mean,
So,
I've like, last time I was knocked in the head, I fell unconscious as well.
oh yeah, no, it's not the unconsciousness I'm questioning. It's the how could they clean Ridley off her suit if her suit goes away when she's unconscious?
Well, everyone's got to sleep sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. What if they just clone the whole planet?
What if we just cloned the whole game? Other M Fusion becomes Other M.
Basically, as I mean, a lot of the way the game flows is very similar to Metroid Fusion.
This is one of those sections I was talking about where it makes you start walking, but thankfully that was a pretty short one.
Yeah, most of them are really short and hardly noticeable. Like, that's just for a single Excel charge. And it just goes by in like 10 seconds.
I always thought that those things were based on at least on the plot, though, so that just happens kind of randomly.
Yeah. Like, there are specific points where it happens, and yeah, I guess that one is a bit arbitrary. Yeah, there's an instance where you gotta target these wires that are blocking the elevator from falling, and it'll just automatically target the Gmer right next to you. Really short and hardly noticeable. Like, that's just for a single Excel charge. And it just goes by in like 10 seconds.
I always thought that those things were based on at least on the plot, though, so that you're hearing that echo too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, there are specific points where it happens. So the it's about to come up on a tunnel arbitrary here. It's gonna lead him to. Yeah, there's an instance where you got a unique upgrade actually. These wires that are blocking the. Gonna be fighting some robotic flying guns, helicopter guns, helicopters that are guns. They shoot laser beams. Pretty neat, I guess. A little goofy, but interesting. I guess there's supposed to be some kind of like battle test or something like that.
All right. How many pickups are there in this run? It definitely seems like he's finding a lot of items.
Yeah, there are 100. So there are 9 energy tanks. You would think there would be a lot more, but no, there's only 9. Oh, you're right. That's because I believe only 5 of them are full energy tanks, and then there are 16 energy parts. Let's see if I can do my math right. You know, I'm not gonna math. So there are energy tanks, and then there are some multiple of 4 energy parts that make up tanks. And then there are 3, what are they called? They're like purple thingies. There are 3 purple thingies, and what those do are basically allow you to recover more energy when you're low on health. There's this mechanic where if you're low on health, you can hold your Wiimote up and concentrate to recover your health. And each of those tanks will recover another E-tank worth of health.
Okay. So they're just busted the concentration mechanic.
Yeah, because normally when you concentrate, you only get back up to 99 health.
Okay.
Well, you get back 99 health. So then you get up to 399 when you get all of them. And then there are 5 Excel charges, which decrease the time it takes to charge your beam. And at the end of the game, it's very noticeable. It's almost instantaneous charging. And let's see, what else is there besides missile tanks? That might be it. So then there are 70 missile tanks.
All right. So do you know what our next goal is right now, in terms of like what he's trying to accomplish?
Oh yeah, he's about to get a weapon upgrade after he defeats these things. It takes a couple of missiles to kill him, and then he gets this, which is a diffusion beam. What this actually does is when you charge your beam and fire it, it'll disperse into more charge beams when it hits something.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it will be using it. But I guess he wants to focus on getting rid of the hives as soon as he can. It's pretty handy here. Like, if you charge it up before the wall opens up, you can kill, I think, all of them in one shot, basically. But they'll keep infinitely spawning as long as the hives are up, so he wanted to try to destroy those beforehand.
Yeah, this auto-targeting seems like it's giving him a bit of a rough time.
Uh-huh. Again, that's the feature of this enemy. And then he activates this terminal, which unlocks a door across the sector that he encountered earlier. And then we fight another boss. I forget their names.
What the name of these guys is actually supposed to be, but these are supposed to be like the wall heads from Zeb's, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Fune and
Namihe?
Yeah, I think so. But these guys are a huge pain. They're like, you gotta shoot them out of the wall. Like, the first one will just take one shot to come out of the wall, and then you can lethal strike it when, like, after you stun it with a charge beam. There's kind of a bug where if it lands, like, with its mouth flat against the wall, you try to lethal strike it, but you can't physically get behind its mouth, so it just wastes a ton of time, and it gets back up. And that happens a lot, and it's really fortunate that that didn't happen here. He got a really good fight there.
Coffee is a blessing.
Yeah. So there's an interesting trivia about the cutscenes in the game. Although you skip them, most of the cutscenes still add to your final time in game.
Yeah, I know about that. It's such a weird thing.
Like, it's specific parts of specific cutscenes. Like the first boss, the Monsters Inc. boss we fought earlier, the giant purple beetle thing. After that fight, there's a series of 3 cutscenes, basically. And only one of those adds to your final time, or to your file time.
If I had to guess, are they the cutscenes of Other M the movie?
They're actually all in the cinematic. Like, once you beat the game, you unlock Other M the movie, basically.
Yeah.
Like, each cutscene is unlocked in the theater, and then you can watch them all consecutively, and it actually adds in, like, pieces of gameplay to tie the cutscenes together to make one.
Yeah, they thought you loved the story so much that you wanted to watch it as a movie. We kind of know how that went.
It shows off some interesting parts of the gameplay. Like, later on, a bit of a spoiler, Nightmare is in this game, and one of the things that shows off is that you can actually Shinespark Nightmare in the face. And
that's pretty great.
It's really hard to do, and apparently very ineffective. Unfortunately.
Oh, they could have at least made it like a quick kill if they were gonna make you able to do it.
Boy, oh boy, is it useless. But luckily there is a quick kill. I don't know if he knows it, but it's possible and a little inconsistent, so I wouldn't be surprised if he misses it.
So kind of, we got some key hunters here. Is there anything in particular we need to know about them?
They're awful. Like, when you first start this fight, you get like maybe 3 frames to dodge an attack from them. You'll get grabbed and they'll explode.
Wait, the key hunters explode?
Yeah.
What?
Oh, actually, when they're flying, they'll just grab you and try to, like, suck your blood or whatever. Mm-hmm. But if they're on the ground, they'll leap onto you and explode. And it's really obnoxious. There is a potential round skip with these flowers that he's shooting out. I think you got it. But you can shoot that down in 2 rounds. Normally, it'll close the flowers after you destroy 2 of them. But there's a bit of a delay after the second one is destroyed. So you have just enough time to get in a 3rd shot. And just 2 round that first phase. And then you gotta get these key hunters out of the way so you can hit the queen with 6 missile shots.
I will say I legitimately appreciate that the queen is kind of like tied down to the hive, because that's, to my understanding, how the queens of most actual beehives operate, is they will kind of just cluster and stick in one spot.
But, I mean, it's dead, so whatever. Yeah, that's pretty much... That's a pretty neat touch. It's based on real-world creatures and biology.
Yeah.
Or, not biology, the social structure, I guess.
One thing I wanted to mention is kind of an interesting little thing, is that a whole plot in this game is dedicated to explaining why Ridley was on the BSL station in the Fusion run that I commented earlier. Because it turns out that just spawning Ridley out of nowhere isn't really an answer.
Works well enough, I don't know.
An interesting thought is that because of what happens in this game, like, you can't even really say the Federation does any better than the Pirates about, like, bioweapons or anything like that.
It's human nature.
It makes you wonder what the plot of the hopefully inevitable Metroid 5 will be.
Rivaling politics. At war with themselves, basically.
Now I'm just imagining Samus running for president.
That would not work very well.
These fish certainly seem determined to get in Samus's way.
I wouldn't peg Samus as a people person.
Guys, they're turning Metroid into a rail shooter.
Literally.
But
these are kind of interesting sections.
Yeah, there's one thing I definitely won't fault this game for, and it's aesthetic design. Like, it's a very pretty looking game for a Metroid game. Though I can't say I'm a huge fan of Samus' suit.
Yeah, it's pretty simplified. Which is, like, it works for some of the aesthetics in this game, but I don't know, I feel like the suit is a little...
I mean, 1, they gave her high heels, and 2, she doesn't turn purple with the gravity suit.
I think the high heels are actually part of the high jump, the equipment, because the Federation soldiers actually have similar platform shoes. You'll notice in a section later on, when you're following someone, it'll like zoom in on the back of their feet and they're raised up.
think my favorite moment in the game's plot is when they forget about the deleter being a thing.
Yeah.
They're just like, oops, we accidentally the plot thread, bye.
Yep. That's the thing. So you can kind of deduce it, but it's never really revealed and it's never really brought up anymore. It winds up being irrelevant after all.
Mm-hmm. After this person tries to kill you with a giant industrial machine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I cannot remember what these guys are called, but from what I remember, aren't these guys the power bomb doors, pretty much?
No, those are different. But these guys are called spider ducks, because they're spiders with duck heads.
Fair enough.
And only 6 legs. It's kind of a tricky way to fight these. There's kind of tough trick to pull off to rapid fire your missiles. In order to do that, you have to be airborne. So you have to pretty much you point at the screen and then jump, because the controls are a little wonky and there's a bit of a delay before it detects that you're intentionally pointing at the screen.
Do you get a bit of like bullet time when you're looking at the screen and jumping?
Yes. But also when you're in the air, I guess you don't have an animation for reloading your gun when you're in the air. So it just doesn't do it, and you just fire missiles like as soon as the animation for firing them finishes.
I think that's the first time we've seen concentration in this run, right?
Yes. Well, second time. You have to do that once in the intro, the tutorial.
Okay.
But yeah, it actually, it looks like it would make the game pretty free, but generally when you're in the heat of battle, you don't really have that much time or space to do so. So, for example, against the Ridley fight, it gets really dicey. It's almost impossible to recharge.
I'm starting to get amused about how it seems like none of the elevators work and they just want Samus to wall jump up every elevator shaft.
Yeah. Fun fact, some of the area design includes ladders on walls. You can't climb ladders, but you can ride conveyor belts that take you to the other side of the room and then use the morphball tunnels to get across again. Maybe her hands are too big for ladders.
I mean, that wasn't a problem in Fusion.
Oh, you know what it was? She wasn't authorized to use ladder beam.
Adam never authorized the power grip.
Yeah. Well, power grip is used, but not in, like, helpful circumstances, I guess.
Now, I was wondering, I don't think we've really explained much about it. Would you mind explaining some of the more basic combat mechanics? They might not know about, like, Sense Move.
Oh, right. So, Sense Move is one such mechanic where not only do you dodge the attacks, but you can also charge your beam immensely faster. It's almost an instant charge. So you can counterattack by doing so. And that comes into play a lot during the battles. And there's also a thing called Overblast, I believe, usually you'll jump on top of an enemy and like it'll do some kind of wrestling move, and you'll like blast it in the face or something, or shove your cannon into its forehead, and that'll generally deal massive damage. I think some enemies are resistant to it, and they seem to only take the same amount as a regular charge beam. And then there's a lethal strike where you charge your beam and round up into it when it's weakened, and that will do a pretty cool grappling move that just like you wrap your arm around its neck and just fling it to the ground and shove your gun in its mouth and just evaporate it, basically. And you'll have seen that a few times by now from the roly-polies. Those green armadillos.
Couple of interesting notes. One, just to give some context to the whole sense move overcharge lethal strike system, this game was co-developed by Team Ninja, who are obviously known for their pretty technical and like very high octane fighting games, or not fighting games, but like action games. The problem is when you're trying to create your high octane action game for a controller with like 5 buttons, it doesn't really work out very well.
I don't know. This is one of the cooler parts of the game in some people's opinions. It's kind of hit or miss, I guess.
Well, I guess the idea is that it's a little oversimplified from what they would normally do.
Perhaps.
And then another interesting thing, this is a bit of an aside that I wanted to go into, is that this game was actually originally going to be another classic style Metroid game, but when Sakamoto hired Team Ninja to come in and co-develop the game, he also got their team that does all their really high quality like cinematic level cutscenes, and that's what inspired Metroid Other M becoming such a story focused game. And we saw how that went.
But had the foresight to know that we wanted to skip the cutscenes. At least there's that.
After you beat the game once.
Sure.
Without being able to skip the cutscenes, I'm pretty sure this game doubles runtime.
Pretty close to it, yeah. It adds an hour and 40 minutes, I think. Oh, no, that's, it adds about 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I think the in-game time adds about... Like, when you skip the cutscenes, the time will be like an hour and 20 minutes different than the real time. An hour or 20 minutes higher, mind you.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of goofy. It's generally consistent, but a little silly when you don't really get how it works. We're speedrunning time itself. We're beating this game in 5.5 hours, but only in 3.5 hours. And here we are. This, we're going for a bit of a hike.
Oh, is this the long walk?
This is what we want to skip.
In a perfect world.
Some people have tried to use like Game Shark to see if it's even possible to do so, and they're not so optimistic about it.
That's good to hear.
There might be different triggers that they're not sure about, but even if it's possible, we don't yet have a way to get around the triggers to start this walking sequence.
And just to finish off my little aside from earlier, the reason why every character's voice actor sounds like they are literally wooden boards is because Sakamoto decided he also wanted to direct all the English voice actors, not just the Japanese ones. Even though he doesn't natively speak English. So people's lines came across flat because they wanted to make sure they matched up with what he wanted them to do.
Yeah, Samus actually emotes in certain cutscenes, but most of the storytelling is done as effectively like a diary kind of reading, like rather than an in the moment voice acting. And it really seems to come across as basically a reading of the events that happened rather than a first-person story.
It doesn't sound like Samus is, like, cold or, like, keeping to herself. It just sounds like she's bored.
It reminds me, like, you know how when you were in elementary school and kids were supposed to read the textbook out loud?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think of when I hear some of the cutscenes.
Popcorn reading.
Yeah, I love popcorn.
And everyone, popcorn reading was always an exercise in how cruel can I be to my classmates, because everyone just threw the kid they liked the least under the bus.
This kind of not quite mini boss, but this sequence of battles is actually kind of interesting. You'll notice he's trying to jump on the heads to do an overblast shot, and as he's jumping off of their heads, he's trying to shoot them out with a missile in midair, like during their stun animation, and that's a really efficient way to deal with them.
Hey guys, ready for more walking?
Yeah. Luckily, after this point, you walk slightly faster, you'll notice. That's like a whole nother half a mile per hour.
I love how the speed strat in this section is to not walk on the save station, otherwise you'll go even slower. Yeah. The way that I describe Metroid Other M to other people is that there is a good game in Other M, and Yoshio Sakamoto tried to kill it as hard as he could.
Oh.
Also, this is angsty teenage Ridley, so say hi.
Also known as Barney. But you have to let him go, because this isn't even his final form.
Yeah. And if you notice, he's not even really attacking you, he's just kind of like hovering over you like a particularly like drooly dog.
It's actually kind of hard to hit the tail with a. Sometimes, if you shoot at the wrong time, the tail kind of moves about pretty wildly.
This is looking a little rough.
Yeah. One safe strat you could kind of do is you can try to hit it with a charge beam first, and if that misses, then you can shoot it with a missile.
Okay.
Luckily, there are a lot of checkpoints in the game. Basically, right before a boss fight.
Okay, thank God. It brings him right back to it.
Kind of save a checkpoint. Yeah, right back into the action. One of the nice things. And probably that might have been inspired by Team Ninja.
Well, it did hold over into Samus Returns as well. The whole checkpoint system. I can see what you mean. Like, his tail is just going everywhere. Like, how do you stay locked onto that?
Yeah. In theory, you could actually hit it while it's wiggling back and forth. Each time you hit it, it'll flip back and forth an extra time.
Okay.
So you can predict where it's going to stop. But it also kind of wiggles a little in place, so sometimes the missile will miss anyway. So you just gotta time it.
Is Anthony drunk? Like, is he supposed to be shooting this thing by now? There you go.
Well, his thing takes forever to charge. The Federation version of the plasma beam. Like, during the cutscene, you'll notice, like, it's currently charging at, like, 1%. Like 10 seconds after the battle ends.
An interesting little note is that this is kind of supposed to be another tie-in to Fusion Story to explain why the Federation has equipment that it can give to Samus when she's on the BSL.
Yeah. They probably, like, she was in the Galactic Federation before the events of, I believe Metroid 2 was her last Federation mission.
I believe, based on the canon, that by the time of Metroid 1, she had already left the Federation. Like, I'm pretty sure that the cutscenes in this game imply that she left that before she became a bounty hunter.
I thought it was because she brought the Metroid to the research team.
No. The whole... I know the plot of this game way too well, and it's really depressing, but the whole reason that she supposedly left was because Adam let his brother die rather than letting Samus go to try to save him, and Samus had the hots for his brother.
I mean, who doesn't? You see him in, like, 3 seconds.
Also, welcome to Adam Hates Samus. We're doing a heat run for no reason, because even though Varia Suit is a completely non-harmful upgrade to other people, she still has to do a hell run. Also, giant lava fish, who you will literally fish out of the lava later.
Oh yeah, that's the best part.
Yeah, she is legitimately not authorized to use the Varia Suit, even though she's running through literal lava. She has to kill a boss in the lava before she gets permission to use the Varia Suit, right? Or does she get the permission as the boss starts?
When the boss fight starts, yeah.
Looks like the normal beam won't have any impact on the enemy.
To be fair, Adam is watching and looking over a lot of other various findings from the other members of the team, and not paying 100% attention to Samus. Like, he has her visor up, but, like, a bunch of documents kind of shuffled around on the monitor as well, as shown in later cutscenes.
To be fair, the Varia Suit is a upgrade that harms nothing.
He never specifically said, also Varia Suit. Or a space jump. Or gravity. He just said auxiliary items, and she chose to interpret that in the most strict way possible.
You know?
It's debatable.
I feel too much with her on the I will die to prove my point train.
Yeah, sure.
I feel like it might be a little bit of overkill. Yeah.
one thing we can agree on is they probably didn't make the best team, and it was probably for the best that she left his command.
Yeah. Someone brought up in chat Atom Infusion, and it's a little bit of a depressing thing, is that, like, legitimately one of the cool twists in Fusion is ruined retroactively because of Other M.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, looks like we're having a little bit of trouble getting up this ledge.
They didn't want the player to be sad when Adam dies, just Samus. They did a great job.
That's a very good way to put it.
And I'm sorry.
It's happening right after she literally gets shot in the back by him.
Yeah. But why did you shoot me? No explanation given.
Yeah, like, she even explicitly asks, and he just ignores her. Like, was that really necessary?
I have a theory on that, since he is able to see everything she sees, by shooting her, it deactivates her suit, disabling the recording of everything she's looking at, so then the Federation won't have record of Adam. Or I guess the deleter won't know where she is or whatever.
The deleter subplot was already forgotten by that time. That was the last gasp of the deleter subplot, wasn't it? Because they wanted to make you think that whoever shot her in the back was the deleter for just a second.
Sort of. You do find his corpse later on. Like, you don't know 100% that it's him, but you can count up the death toll, and you could deduce that there's only one person left, and it's one of two people. And you know there's an unknown person that died, and then you find the corpse of the last one remaining.
The funniest thing to me about that whole scene, though, is the fact that the reasoning that he gives her for shooting her in the back is that she might not be able to freeze those Metroids, but he kills the Metroid by freezing it.
Yeah. It totally glosses over the question. So those little, those spiny things that roll around, those are an enemy that comes back a few times throughout the rest of the game. And there are a few ways to deal with it. The most reliable way to do it is by standing, like, all the way across the room from it, or really far away from it. And if you're within a certain range, it'll do a bunch of attacks at random. But if you're far enough away, it'll just slowly walk towards you until, like, I guess pretty much a random amount of time, but still, it'll consistently stick out its neck to shoot a bunch of babies out of its shell at you. And that's when it's vulnerable, so you can quickly kill it every time. It gets a bit harder later on with smaller rooms.
For some quick context for those a little bit confused about the setting, literally just imagine this is Fusion Part 2 Electric Boogaloo. This is just more of the same of, like, environments meant to be designed to hold specific life forms on a ship. It's literally just the BSL again. So these are just artificial areas designed to hold alien life forms and for research purposes.
Yeah, the plot is very similar to Fusion, and it's just it just happens to be a prequel as well.
One of my favorite quotes from, like, the plot summary in the beginning is, like, talking about the baby's cry distress signal, and it's like, it's supposed to, like, the way that it's phrased makes it sound like it's supposed to be a more important distress signal than normal, but, like, a distress signal is a distress signal. It means something is wrong. Why do you need a more distressed distress signal?
Now we have Varia suit.
No, we don't. We have the Varia feature.
Right. So this boss is pretty much just about all the bosses are pretty interesting. And this one in particular, there are a few different ways to kill it, and unfortunately, the coolest way is slower, but the fastest way is to freeze its hand on the ground and then shoot it with a missile, and that'll stun it. So it reveals this weak point on the top of its head that you can shoot with the ice beam, the charged ice beam, and you could actually get multiple hits per round if you can manage to hit it while it's recoiling from a shot. So you'll kind of notice there, like, it does this big drawn out animation, and then it'll be hitting it as it's like falling back down, and it recovers after 2 of those recoils, so you could actually get twice as much damage by doing those double hits.
Alright.
And that'll skip a round. And if you don't manage to pull it off, the 3rd round is very random, unfortunately. You just have to wait for it to be at rest again.
Yeah, but it looks like he got it all good.
Yeah, that was really good. Really well done. So that was a sweet quick kill. And I think there were a couple more afterwards as well. And if you ever watch a Let's Play, you'll see them jump on the frozen arm and run all the way up on top of its head and blast it. And that's really cool, but unfortunately it always takes 3 rounds instead of 2. And it's also a long animation. Although some of the speed strats are cooler than the normal ones. Actually, a lot of people, when they first play the game, they stick to just charge beam to deal with things, and they just forget that they have so many other options.
Well, to be fair, aiming at the screen to shoot your missiles isn't exactly the most intuitive thing to get stuck in your mind as part of the gameplay loop.
True. Neither is jumping at an enemy or, like, turning into a ball. Or just charging straight into it. Like, those are all things that you can do to defeat enemies.
Okay,
And
Samus,
things that
to Sector
in
2.
different situations can be optimal.
Survivors hiding there.
But you just don't think to do them unless you try literally everything on everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But Charge Beam works, so they use it all the time. It's good enough to get through the game.
This game could have had a really exciting final chapter, except Adam literally steals your Turian.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he just goes into Sector 0 and kills himself. The way that this game ends, like the first final boss, is the most depressing thing in existence. I can't help but look at this thing and just keep thinking it looks like a really, really angry trilobite.
Yep. We also refer to it as Metal Sonic, Beyblade, Roomba,
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty much a horseshoe crab.
This elevator is bound for
Good
the
call.
main sector.
I've never realized that this thing even does the same like up and down elevator thing that Fusion does in terms of its like section layout.
Level 4 warning is now in effect in Sector 2. An irregularity in the climate control systems of Sector 2 has been confirmed. Please be sure
Yeah, in terms of room layout, the way the rooms interconnect, I think Sector 1 is the strongest. It's the most interesting to route in 100%. And that was really fun when I first started working on the run. And Sector 3 is neat with things you can do. Well, so is Sector 2. But Sector 2 is more just like a series of loops. It's basically the NASCAR sector.
Yeah.
It has cool tricks throughout it, but it just feels more linear than the other sectors.
I believe the next boss coming up is the power loader, right?
I believe so.
AKA Alien the movie.
Yeah, they definitely drew a lot of inspiration from the Alien series.
Oh no, he's getting knocked
Sakamoto is a huge fan of this.
Yeah, I can definitely see the inspiration in the series as a whole, but like that boss is literally just the armor that like Ridley fights in at the or Ellen Ripley fights in at the end of Alien.
And now it introduces these wolves with mammoth tusks, and we just run past them. It turns out you don't need to kill them. They have a ton of health. They take a really long time to kill, and they don't even damage you if you just like run into them.
That's interesting. No contact damage at all.
They'll charge into you, and they'll kind of do this. Not really headbutt. Like, what's the opposite of a headbutt? Where you like try to swipe with your tusks. Yeah, they do this butthead attack, and the hurt box on that isn't active until like after you've already ran past them.
That's funny.
So they're kind of a pain to deal with, so we just don't. And then right here, there's this bridge that it falls if you run across it. You could actually skip the bridge collapsing animation just by going to either side of the bridge instead of running forward onto it. But the bridge does later collapse anyway.
One thing I've noticed is that this game seems to rely on that a lot to drop you into like enemy areas.
Yeah.
Like I've had to have seen at least 4 bridges collapse already.
And there's that hive that you jump down into. Now, where you're normally supposed to go is like at the end of that bridge, and it actually is technically possible to, as I was saying before, you can infinite bomb jump, and people have bomb jumped from like one of the tunnels onto the higher platform. That's doable, but unfortunately, to advance in that direction, you do eventually need to Shinespark again anyway. So we need to unlock that by getting to the next plot trigger.
You can step away for just 1 second. I'm just gonna grab a quick water.
Alright. So, functionally, it's kind of no different from other Metroid games. You have to go to a certain place, and then you have an item, or you have an upgrade. But it's just really silly plot-wise. In some ways, I think it would probably be better if it just weren't explained at all. You just don't have the items anymore. Sold them on the black market or something. Yeah, Samus is actually really tall, canonically.
If you want to talk about the shoulders on Samus's armor, look at Samus Returns. Like, it's like they took all of the extra stuff that they took off on the other M version of the suit and added them on top of her normal big shoulders. I mean, just because it's printed in a...
Wasn't it in Melee somewhere? I know it's in Other M. It shows the height of all the main characters. Height and weight, I think. Or maybe just height and age. Of course, Anthony just so happens to be, like, way taller.
Mm-hmm.
Although, it's more notable in cutscenes just for, I guess, storytelling purposes. They do tend to, like, even in American movies, they sometimes make characters, like, walk in platform shoes or something, because it just makes the dynamic look more fitting of their character.
So the first area you said the defining thing was that the rooms actually kind of wound around each other and made it interesting to route in the Biosphere. In the Pyrosphere, the heat runs were kind of the unique thing. What's the unique mechanic in the ice area?
You kind of... Well, it loops around, but it kind of... I think it's more geared towards usage of the speed booster upgrade. The speed booster ability. And there are some sections like this where it's just like ice and water. In general, it's just that kind of theme. But there are also lengthy hallways that you can charge through really quickly. And it's actually kind of fun to use speed booster in this.
From what I have heard, the speed booster isn't bad, it just takes a little too long to get going.
It's kind of very limited in usage. Like, it's functionally, it's really cool, and there are actually a couple of minor skips. There are some puzzles that you could just totally bypass with tricky ways to get a Shinespark. But it's just in so few areas because of the way they designed the other parts.
Looks like we got another rail shooter coming up.
Yeah. So you technically don't have to deal with all of these enemies. You can theoretically just ride the rail all the way to the end while just like keeping the enemies at bay. But it's... I'm not gonna do it, that's for sure. And neither is he. you're supposed to run all the way to the end of this section, freeze the fan with a charged ice beam, and then destroy the hive behind the fan by standing right next to it. Otherwise, the frozen fan will block the shot.
You mean what he just did?
Exactly. And you can destroy some of the ice on the tracks while hanging from the ledge. But it's kind of inconsistent, so since you're already over here, you might as well just deal with it now.
Mm-hmm. So what made you decide to pick up this game as a speed game in the first place, back when you were running it?
I wanted it to have a speed run. No one really took it seriously, and like there was a pretty good segmented run. I don't even know what the time was. I don't think I finished watching that actually, but like it didn't have a community. It didn't really have much of a scene. There wasn't like an aggregated source of speed tricks. There kind of still isn't. You just gotta watch Modern Run to get the info, unfortunately.
I know the feeling. Back when I first started running Metroid 2 actively, there was literally one active runner other than myself, and that was the world record holder.
Yeah, exactly. And I wanted this game to have a good speed run because it's like not the worst game in the world. It is part of the series, and at the time I was I had run half of the other Metroid games, so I was like, I would like to just finish off the whole series, and this included. That was before
When's
Federation Force came out. Metroid 2, I have done that. Not great at it, but
I don't think you're on the leaderboards.
Probably not, but there's a recording of my run somewhere. There are a lot of leaderboards I haven't submitted to. I just haven't gotten around to it. I mean, I'm gonna go back and improve times anyway.
I actually wasn't sure if you really were interested in speedrunning anymore. I haven't heard a lot out of you in a while.
I'm always interested in speedrunning. I don't think anyone really ever retires. People have retired repeatedly over the years. It's just a hobby that's... I mean, you just have a love for it, you know?
The way that I've seen it is it usually ends up about the same way in the speedrunning scene as in the competitive Smash Brothers scene. If anyone makes a big post that's all emotional and talking about how they're retiring to like move on to a better part of their life, they'll be back within like a couple of months at most. Yeah. But it's the people who just vanish who are the ones who actually retire, who don't say a word, and then they're just gone. And then you're like, oh, what happened to that person? And then you realize you haven't talked to them in a year and a half, and it's like, oh, they literally just quit.
The most efficient way through here should be delivering shoulder impacts with your speed booster, so I'm authorizing its use.
So yeah, this is the room where you get speed booster. You have to go far enough to a... There's like a checkpoint if you go far enough into the room, so that when you go back to the door, Adam will talk to you. And basically, you want to look at your mini map, and as soon as you can see the door on the edge of that radar, then you've gone far enough. So this is Charge Train. Choo choo. This is the hype train.
So this is one of the few games where Shinesparking is legitimately required to beat the game, right? Because of that one section with the snow.
Oh yeah, I guess so. Yeah, and all the other games that have Shinesparking, it's kind of just a neat hidden mechanic.
I always thought it was really interesting how in Super they actively made Shinesparking like a critical decision you had to make since it actually cost health. And I
Yeah,
don't
that was
mind
neat.
that I don't mind that they changed it to be more forgiving in later games so they could do more with it. But it certainly was interesting that their original intention was to make it like a super powerful, like hidden technique.
Mm-hmm.
My main problem with the map design that I have seen from other M and similar games is just that it seems like it's so linear. Like there's never, it's not even like there's, it's one thing if it's linear, as in like there's only one way that you can go, like overall. But the thing is, like, there's not even any other direction for you to try and to fail. Like, there's not even any dead end like rooms. Like, you enter a room and you can't go anywhere in there yet because like the game hasn't said you can. Like, there's just not even another door.
Yeah, a lot of the times you can backtrack through sectors at times, and some people will get lost in Sector 1 especially because there are a few branching paths there. But for the most part, you just have this marked on your map that you try to get to, and it's generally like maybe not the most obvious, but I mean more obvious than other paths, I guess. So there are some quirks, some bugs about Speed Booster, unfortunately.
Really?
Whenever you bump, like a bump or a door frame or like a little divot in the ground, it can potentially and often does just cancel the progress towards your Speed Booster. Like even like you'll see your thrusters start to light up, and then you'll hit a rock and it'll just immediately cancel, but you're still running. And that's pretty subtle. But there's also an issue where if you're shooting your beam and you decide to stop shooting your beam, sometimes that will also interrupt your Speed Booster.
I feel like he's been refilling a lot. Do you think he's nervous?
I mean, some of the areas are just you take a lot of damage, and it's just kind of tricky to sense move all of them. Sometimes you could sense move right into another attack. It's honestly, sense move is really inconsistent in this game. It's it often fails when you want it to work, and sometimes occurs when you don't want it to.
I guess it's time for Spider Duck Part 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah, it goes down much quicker now with a Ice Beam. And there are a couple platforms around the room that you could use to get a higher vantage point. You could actually do an overblast by jumping on its back when it's exposed on top. But that takes time, and it doesn't really do that much more damage than just missiling it, unfortunately.
Out of curiosity, why does he have to kill this one here? Because it seems like he could just keep running up towards that building. Is there like a path it's blocking?
When it collapses, it kind of drops down just like a patch of snow that allow you to get up the next ledge. And I assume there's probably also a cutscene trigger that doesn't activate until you fight it. Well, that's kind of a big assumption. Maybe I shouldn't assume that. I don't think the game is that strict with its event sequences. Yeah, it is.
These things really seem just soak up ammo.
Yeah, they take a ton to kill, and you can sometimes like you do sense moves that give you the quicker recharge, basically instant recharge, and you can kind of stand underneath it and blast away, and like it'll stomp around, and you could sense move pretty rapidly. Kind of chain charge beams together. But it's also
what's coming up right
not
here is
always
going to be the Pharaoh Crusher boss, right?
Yeah.
Anything special we need to know about that boss in particular?
Oh boy, its hitboxes are kind of huge and obnoxious. It has these weed whackers or something that they're really wide, and then it'll charge at you. Actually, if I remember right, it charges at you in reverse, and then it's more dangerous like when it turns around.
No.
So an interesting
you can dodge out of the way
here.
And then land on the spikes.
An interesting thing here is that Samus is pretty much regarded as a galactic hero by this point in the story. Like, this is post-Super Metroid Samus. She has killed all the Metroids, destroyed the space pirates on planet Zebes twice, gone through the Phazon crisis. Like, people know who she is. And yet, the lone survivor in this game runs away like Samus is trying to punch her in the throat.
She's got her own motives.
Yeah.
So mostly you wanna use its own attacks to get your sense move and quickly charge, and that'll deal with it pretty quickly. You gotta knock out each of its arms, and then like once you get the wheels frozen, you can finally do a lethal strike on it.
Yeah, this was the boss I was talking about earlier when I mentioned aliens.
I believe each of the wheels have a separate hitbox, and you only need to freeze one of them, but it's kind of hard to target one specifically, unfortunately. He's doing a pretty good job here, just keeping on one side of it. And I feel like the hitbox for the lethal strike is actually in front of it where the spikes are, even though when the cutscene starts for when you kill it, she jumps up the back of it. Kind of a funny in-continuity error. Yeah, that's a space lawnmower.
Since we're skipping the plot, the blonde-haired girl is supposed to be, is she supposed to be Melissa or supposed to be Madeline? I always get mixed up.
She says she's Madeline, but it's revealed later that she's actually Melissa.
Mm-hmm. And she's effectively Mother Brain in person form.
Yeah.
She can control the Metroids and tell them what to do.
They decided that instead of just cloning Mother Brain, it would be safer just to develop an AI themselves. And what could possibly go wrong? And then she talks with Metroids and like Ridley and whatnot, and then things go wrong. Whoops.
Oh, he got it. Okay, cool. It did look like he almost missed that Shinespark.
Oh yeah.
Oh. Is this RNG? I think it is.
What, the
floor tiles here.
No, they're on set patterns.
Okay.
course, the Dreamers kind of behave randomly, but they're mostly easy to get around. And potentially, in round 2, like, you come through this section twice, kind of back to back. And the second time through, there is a damage boost. I'm not sure if he's going to go for it. It's really awkward to do. You have to be on, like, certain parts of tiles as they're exploding. And it'll boost you through other electrified tiles. But it's kind of dangerous. And it's something you gotta practice for a while to get consistent at. So now we see that switch through a pane of glass. Unfortunately, we don't have any weapon authorized that enables us to shoot through glass. So we gotta walk backwards until we're told to go forward again.
While running down a hill towards the camera like that, how do you charge a spark?
You just hold down continuously.
Like, I would think that would make me just continue to run, so that's interesting.
Yeah, basically charging a Shinespark is just running in a straight line for, well,
You need a permeating shot effect to get past this.
I guess the camera makes it a little funky in this game, but typically just running continuously for a certain amount of time. And then you store that the kinetic energy into some kind of thruster device to Shinespark.
Those wolf tusk sheep things really are trying, huh?
Yep.
And failing.
They are almost doing something. They do, like, you can't charge a speed booster while running into them, so they do delay it slightly. They just want to cuddle.
Give me 1 sec. RTMP froze on me. There we go. Does that shining mean he's holding a Shinespark charge? Oh no, just a normal charge shot. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this avalanche is insta-kill. Uh-oh. Appears we have lost Jagger. Something might have happened to his internet. Hopefully he'll be back in a minute. But it's just gonna be me for now. I do know that how this section works is that these platforms will fall down if they're not frozen. Well, some of them will. specific ones will fall down if they're not frozen. I don't exactly know if it will stay that way. Like if they stay frozen or if they'll unfreeze. But just doing some pretty quick climbing, getting up here.
Data recording and shield restoration sequence activated. Sequence complete. Process successful.
In Metroid Other M, the Chozo don't exist. They're just a figment of your imagination. They are literally not mentioned once in the entire game. Adam was her father figure. Is that Jagger?
Alright, sorry about that.
Okay, good to have you back.
So now we're on the obligatory elevator stage of the beat 'em up. This is actually one of the toughest sections in any percent and low percent, or well, hard mode, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, 100% seems to be pretty consistent at least.
Yeah, you're not really in much danger of dying with more than a few energy tanks, but dealing with these pirates quickly is pretty difficult because there's 4 of them and they're always shooting. And
Correct me if I'm wrong, but this guy is called the Redodian, right?
I believe so. Better known as Shiny Pincer. So Shiny Pincer is mostly just a boss you gotta shoot charge beams at. Whenever it just like slams its arms on the ground and then opens its red eye at you, it's charging up an attack, and shooting a beam will charge that attack faster, and it does a ton of damage if you let it. But you could cancel it by shooting missiles at the eye.
Interesting.
And I was trying to figure out what the best course of action for this boss was. Essentially, you keep firing your your wave beam, and dodges attacks to get a quick charge, and you just do that. It's not really there's not much more to it. It's unfortunately just kind of inconsistent.
Alright.
There's no real quick kill to him yet.
I was
Later on,
tunnel, I'm not gonna lie.
yeah, later on is especially. I really like that Morkwall tunnel. It's really cinematic.
This elevator is
Oh, not low. Sorry, the one after this. The oh no, it's this one. Wait, is it? Anyways, yeah. It later on you unlock super missiles, and that becomes its main weakness, and you destroy it really quickly.
Makes sense.
You could basically stun lock it later on.
An irregularity has been confirmed in the geothermal power plant and the experimental simulated desert area. All staff members are asked to please evacuate immediately.
The robot in the elevator doesn't sound robotic enough to be a robot, but it doesn't sound like a real person enough to be a person. If that makes sense.
It's a person pretending they're a robot. You'll notice
it feels like this
telemarketers
hazy
kind of
middle
do the
ground.
same. Like, whenever I get phone calls from telemarketers, they definitely sound like telemarketers pretending to be robots, pretending to be telemarketers. I don't know if you get that impression. Maybe it depends on the area.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, we find that this door next to the elevator has been locked out, and we have to go back to a terminal earlier in the sector to unlock it. And then we fight just one Beyblade. Pretty sure it's a Beyblade. Yeah.
Isn't this the exact same room we already fought one of these in?
Yeah. It must be an infestation. Gotta get one of those exterminators out here.
So what's actively going on in the plot now? The deleter tried to kill Samus with the power loader, but then just dipped.
Oh, and I believe Samus and the team were told to group up in Sector 3. I guess deal with there's like a power source that they gotta activate.
Mm-hmm.
And Adam doesn't want them to do it alone because there's something going on and people dying, so he wants them to group together to make sure there's no shenanigans.
Alright.
That's probably why the door was locked. I think at this point there's a mysterious there's a cutscene where someone dies somewhere in this sector. It might be in the later sector though, I'm not sure. It's one of the cutscenes around this time.
So I've asked you about your favorite parts of the speedrun. What is your least favorite part?
Samus, use of the grapple beam is authorized.
Well, it's not the cutscenes since I could skip them.
Get to Anthony and cover him.
It's probably... Oh yeah, it's Exam Center where you walk for like 2 minutes. We're past that, luckily. I think from this point on, it's just gonna get better.
Alright.
It just takes a really long time for the game to get going.
That's fair.
I feel like Skyward Sword was kind of the same way, where it just took hours before you got to fun parts. I mean, described it as like the greatest dessert of your life after several plates worth of vegetables.
But see, vegetables would imply that like Other M is healthy. This is a very sickly game.
Yeah. It has its moments. Like the combat is it's interesting and fun. You just there are long hallways in between sections that just aren't very interesting. A lot of the room designs are kind of flat. Like very few of them actually make use of the third dimension. Most of the time, you're just running straight from one door to another.
Seems to be how it goes.
And I think that's largely attributed to just, I think, inefficient loading. Developers, especially of 3D games, have to kind of mask the loading times, so they just put they design rooms in such a way to just make it take longer. And unfortunately, they didn't do a very good job of making that interesting in this case. One of the Metroid Prime developers had mentioned that during some Games Done Quick commentary. They said a lot of the rooms were designed to just like they would put small hallways in between major rooms just to unload the room behind you and to load the next room in front of you in a way that you can't really see it. So it's just a seamless transition from one area to the next.
Yeah, that seems like it's always been something.
Yeah, they did a pretty good job of it, and I think that they needed to play around with the speed of travel in this game.
So, looks like it's finally time to try and get the fish out of water.
This is such a fun boss. There are a lot of tricks to this thing that you don't even get to see everything you could potentially do. There's one strat when it's jumping over your head that you could snipe it out of midair, and like you can't just lock on and target it and shoot it because you're just gonna miss. But you can kind of lead your shot by manually aiming, and you can knock it out of the air and it lands on the ground and you can attack it. And then there's this intended mechanic where you just fish it up with a grapple beam. And just hammer away with the charge beam.
Alright.
That's really cool.
Look, man, I swear it was this big. Oh.
I don't know if they would ever make a Metroid launch title, because they want to take their time with Metroids. I've noticed a trend that they seem to wait several years between titles.
Yeah, the thing about Metroid games is that they're very rarely like as profitable because they don't see a whole ton of sales in Japan. Metroid Other M was actually created partially with the intent to create a more Japanese Metroid game, and obviously it did not come across very well.
Samus, it looks like that monster is headed to the geothermal electric power generator. Track it and put an end to it.
Yeah, there are parts of some of the cutscenes that are very anime.
Data recording and shield restoration sequence activated. Sequence complete. Process successful.
So now Adam tells you that there's some trouble in the reactor core that he just sent Anthony into, or the power generator. And we know who's responsible for that, but we're not gonna get to him. We got another boss to deal with first.
I actually forgot there was a desert area in this game.
Yeah, there's actually a neat Shinespark trick. There are a couple neat Shinespark tricks you could do in the desert area. Unfortunately, it's really inconsistent. It's because of like just variable terrain, kind of shifts in camera angles. You can easily get your speed booster interrupted just all over the desert.
Alright, well there's one Shinespark. Going for another, I think. Yep, there we go. Ooh, almost missed the ledge. Alright. Got some more Zebezians. Looks like we're just not really interested in fighting them, just running on by. I really don't understand why they wouldn't have at least incorporated grapple beam like auto aim into Samus moving around the 2D space, because like trying to go into first person to swing on a grapple beam just seems so intrusive to the gameplay. Kills the smoothness.
Yeah.
Jagger will be back in just a moment. He's just switching devices. Hola.
Yeah.
So around what percent are we at right now in terms of item collection?
You know, I've never really estimated that. Like, I know you get most of the percent after the first final boss.
Mm-hmm.
Like during the epilogue, because it's just so much more efficient. But
I mean, it makes sense.
I don't know, probably like less than 20%. Maybe more. Probably around 20%. It's really hard to say, because there are a few areas you just don't want to go back through.
It's this guy again. He sure doesn't want to leave us alone.
Yep.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't he give you, like, secret missiles or something?
He does. Later on.
How
Spoilers,
many
you
times
fight
do
him
you
again.
fight him? Isn't this the third time fighting him already?
I think so. I think you fight him 5 or 6 times.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. This is probably the last time that he's real challenge. You'll be getting super missiles pretty soon, and then it'll just be pretty trivial.
You know, I think that part of my problem with Other M's combat comes from the same reason that a lot of people have a problem with Samus Return's combat, and it's just that the overuse of the sense move makes it feel like it's very tiresome, because you just keep using the same option over and over again.
True, yeah. It's a very common complaint. It's kind of amplified by the fact that people mostly stick to the attacks that they know work. So they're just always using sense move and charge for absolutely, and it'll eventually work. It just winds up being slow for a lot of fights. And it makes a lot of the fights boring, unfortunately.
That's the blessing and the curse that comes with having a more, like, powerful combat system in a Metroid game. Like, most Metroid games can usually keep their combat relatively basic, and it stays engaging because of exploration, but, like, Other M is decidedly, generally, a combat-focused Metroid game, for better or for worse.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to design a movement-based game with like as much graphically intense scenery as these areas. Maybe they could have done more to increase the combat of the areas. But when you're speedrunning, you kind of just run past enemies anyway.
Ooh. Uh-oh. Okay, good. He caught himself.
Yeah.
It seems like he's might be getting some bad enemy RNG.
Yeah,
Ooh.
These are pretty annoying to deal with.
I think at this point it might be in his best interest to just grab onto the wall and take these enemies out.
Yeah, you generally want to freeze him. He's kind of trying, but that puffer especially, it'll pester you for days. That was really unfortunate. And I kind of like these Gumby enemies in the lava. They remind me of Gumby.
That's a funny way to put it. The way that I usually take them is I consider them, I consider them to be, kind of the evolution of those lava guy-looking enemies from, Super Metroid, how they kind of, like, they kind of just come up with a face and then go back down and turn it into a hand.
Yeah, a lot of people forget about those guys.
To be
Super
fair,
Metroid had a lot of enemies.
Show up in any place that you go in a speedrun as a general rule. You usually avoid those enemies.
Indeed.
Oof. Yeah, he got pimp slapped a little bit.
And now we found out that Barney wasn't even its final form.
Ooh.
Something even more
Scary.
sinister than Barney. So it goes from Furby to Barney to ultimately Ridley. Which is really interesting. It gets from most to least frightening.
That reminds me of a funny little story, if you don't mind me going off on a little anecdote for a moment. When I was real young, like 4 years old, my dad found this Furby chilling in the parking lot of like a Walmart that we went to. And it had just been there for so long that instead of learning any sorts of words, it just learned all the engine noises of the cars around it. So it was just this Furby that, like, it was this Furby, like, you would talk to it and it would just make unintelligible demon screams at you. And it was pretty amazing to have around all the time.
That was probably somebody's science fair project.
I mean, it was just sitting in a parking lot, like, unguarded. It had just been living, like, dirty and next to like one of those lights in a parking lot. And it was pretty amazing.
Eating out of the garbage and junk. Yeah.
I want to say that eventually someone accidentally reset it, and my dad was very sad.
Oh. Well, battery might have died or something. So Ridley is actually, it's a pretty satisfying fight. You mainly, you kind of have to switch up your attacks, because it's not actually vulnerable to missiles until it goes into its Mega form, into its Mega evolution, because he's a Pokemon. And then he's vulnerable to super missiles, or at least he gets knocked out of his form by super missiles. And then you just want to wail on him with the plasma shots, and just squeeze in sense move charges when you can.
This is another sad thing about this game, is that like this is one of the best boss fights in it, but everyone's memory of it is tainted because of the absolutely terrible cutscene before it.
Until you speedrun it and you skip them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah! So much more satisfying. And these Excel charges, as I mentioned before, they shorten the length of time that you need to charge your beam fully. So it gets pretty fast eventually. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, not all cases, but probably a little over half the cases, you can charge just as fast with a sense move. And in the case of Ridley, it's generally just as fast, if not faster, to just stick with the normal shots, just because the DPS is so much higher.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can shoot the beam decently rapidly, but there's a big recoil time whenever you fire a charge beam.
So how far are we out, do you think, from the first final boss?
I want to say like half an hour.
Alright. I like how, like, Samus is, like, supposedly being all sneaky and stuff in her bright orange and red power suit with covered in glowing lights.
Yeah.
Like,
and you can see that trooper had these, like, platform shoes that are kind of glowing around it. I think those are Federation-issued high jump boots. Oh yeah, one thing I kind of forgot to cover, like since the start of the run, is that he's going to be rolling around in Morphball all the time, and has been for the last 2 hours, because it's significantly faster than running unmorphed. But if you bump into something, it really kills your momentum, so a lot of times you'll have noticed he'll be rolling up to something and kind of springballing over it, just to kind of mitigate the time lost from obstacles.
mm-hmm.
And then it'll just instantly morph again. And that, the speed of the morph ball, it's almost as fast as Speed Booster.
That's
it's
crazy.
Pretty ridiculous. That's one of the things you need to know if you want to learn to get out of bounds in the one place we know how to. You just have to really optimize your morph ball rolling. And these grapple points, unfortunately, also have a bug associated with them. You have to go into first-person mode to grapple onto things, and then when you jump off, you're in third-person mode again. But when you switch from first-person to third-person mode, it it takes a moment for your D-pad to register as being held sideways.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're holding a certain direction, you'll get flung off the grapple point at a 90-degree angle. And it's right into a wall. It's really annoying. And that combined with the fact that it's kind of hard to tell, but you actually do move a little faster in the air if you're holding a direction. So you can't just let go of the D-pad. I mean, you can, but it's just a little slower.
That is like the one cutscene in the game that I'm sad we skip. Because it's the only time in the entire story that Samus actually shows any agency. She even gets a little sassy, like, any objections, Adam? But unfortunately, it's kind of undermined by the fact that the power is down in Sector 3 or whatever, and so he could not hear her, even if she thought he was listening.
Well, she's passive-aggressive. She's not going to stay to his face. So you go down this elevator, and you get to this hidden sector where there's, I guess there's important research that we don't quite get to uncover yet. But this is where you find the imposter Madeline once again. And you talk her down, and you get some information out of her. And you find out that the whole reason for this space station was to just undermine the Federation goals and develop bioweapons, and to revive the Metroids and use them as biological warfare. And then you just immediately leave the way you came. No boss fights, no big battles or anything. You go down an elevator, cutscene, and then you go back up one.
This game is sometimes pretty good at anti-climax. First final boss, anyone? That you don't even get to shoot?
It's kind of emotional. It's just not very good, I guess.
Yeah, like...
Not the best. Now we finally get to see the Redosian, or Shiny Pincer, actually explode.
The problem with appealing to, like, people's emotions is you have to do it successfully, or it just sucks.
Yeah, I kind of started tearing up when that, like, big orchestral music was playing when Adam was walking into his terrible decision.
Yeah, see, the way you phrased it is the exact reason why I cannot feel bad for him.
Yeah.
Like, he actively brings that upon himself.
Yeah, Samus does a really good job of being the only one who's upset about it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, even his other... Like, does Anthony Higgs even ever mourn his commanding officer's death?
What a crazy mission. He still can't get his head around it.
This elevator is bound for the main...
I don't know, maybe he's jaded. Federation has been known to make some pretty terrible decisions.
Mm-hmm. people forgot to remember him one too many times.
This elevator is bound for Sector 2.
This elevator is bound for Sector 2. This sounds like those incredibly bored voices on like when you're at like the airport and you're riding like public transit.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the plane train.
Yeah, they generally want the listeners to be as docile as possible.
Mm-hmm. Which is about as an appropriate reaction to other MS any other. Docile non-interest.
Yeah, the space station is going to be blown to smithereens.
Emergency in Franker Z.
Nice Shinespark there.
Rest in peace, Franker Z.
This, that missile tank earlier is kind of tough for people to find. You just go up and down this, slide. Like, just wondering, like, it's right in the middle here. I keep Shinesparking into the ceiling and nothing happens.
Mm-hmm. It's really jarring to me that, like, the missile tanks and stuff like that are all affected by physics. Like, watching them, like, blow up, like, their item container and they just flop around on the ground.
Yeah. So now we get our, pretty much, I believe, our first use of the Seeker missiles. Luckily, they're much better in this game than they are in the Prime series. They all go straight to their target. Unfortunately, in the Prime games, they kind of have an issue where they have this, I don't know, like this
is
automatic
it
calculation of physics. It's pretty close. Like the missiles in Metroid Prime kind of like fly out to the side and then just like wind around in various wacky paths. And a lot of times that just ends up getting them obstructed by pipes and doors and walls and floors.
Mm-hmm. I always felt like Nightmare is an enemy that translated way better as a 2D sprite.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot harder in Fusion because it takes up like at least a quarter of the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Like a whole quadrant of the screen. It's really hard to get around them. And this is kind of tough to avoid his attacks, but it's not that tough. And a lot of his, whenever he takes damage, he kind of recoils as well, and that helps to just avoid getting hit. So now we have extreme gravity, and it's really difficult to space jump in this.
Does the gravity feature get turned on after the first or the second fight?
First. So you get to use it against Nightmare in the second round.
Something
you could Shinespark up his up to the top of his room. Mm-hmm. That's a nice use of the Shinespark against him, just to get to him faster. but mostly you just want to use super missiles. There's strat on the first phase where you use a certain combination of regular missiles and super missiles, and that'll allow you to skip the third round. But it's kind of inconsistent, and you have to do a rapid fire missile trick, and it's pretty tough to get down, honestly.
I feel like we've been ragging on the story a lot, so I'd like to say that I'm pretty sure that there is some sort of, not ROM hack obviously, but like some sort of hack that I've heard kind of rebalances the story, like it changes the context of a lot of cutscenes and cuts out a lot of filler.
Interesting.
And I think it's supposed to like just create a more total plot. So that might be something for some people who think they might like this game but don't want to deal with the obviously controversial plot. Might want to look that up. I do think that Nightmare in this first phase looks cool. I think they did the whole mask thing well. I just think that like they didn't really do very nicely with his face once it pops off.
Yeah. Like everything in the game is very shiny.
Yeah, like it doesn't really feel like flesh in the same way that his melting face did in Fusion.
Kind of looks more like an action figure.
Mm-hmm.
So basically you want to freeze the gravity mechanism on his tail with the ice shots. In any percent runs, you just want to use regular beam shots, but with the Excel charges, you get an 100%. It's pretty close to the same amount of time to fire and to freeze it.
Makes sense.
And 6 super missiles is down. The nice thing about running 100% is you don't have to replenish your ammo in between phases, in between rounds. It gets to be a problem in the second form because it can do some pretty nasty things with the gravity. Like, it won't affect Samus herself, but it'll affect her shots. So it's really hard to actually hit Nightmare.
Makes sense.
Data recording and shield restoration sequence activated. Sequence complete. Process successful.
And kind of similarly to Metroid Fusion, the music in Other M is mostly ambient. And
I think
there are very
Fusion does
few
a lot
tracks.
better job of balancing the melody, though.
Yeah. There are fewer tracks than I remember there being, but I think that's because it just uses them better, I suppose.
The biggest problem with Other M in terms of being a game in the franchise, like even totally ignoring the story, is that it just feels like a mediocre 2.5D Fusion. Like, it doesn't feel like it has its own identity, honestly.
It's got unique gameplay. It's just it doesn't all work. They had a lot of ideas that they threw at it, and they just really they didn't put enough time into testing and reworking things. and they just kind of released the game. The original Metroid team never really did a 3D game before, and there are a lot of I think there are signs of inexperience in the design.
I've said it before that I feel like some of the original spirit of Metroid was lost because Gunpei Yokoi's unfortunate passing, because he was the main header of the first 3 Metroid games, Metroid 1, Metroid 2, and Super Metroid. And then he tragically passed away before, and I think that's why we got that big Metroid Dark Age, because despite how Sakamoto was credited as like the father of Metroid, because it's only because he was the other father of Metroid left around. He was kind of like Metroid's godfather sitting there on the side.
I think it was like mostly in charge with the story of the Metroid series, and it just kind of like that wasn't really the main focus of video games at the time. So Yokoi had a brilliant mind in terms of developing and like supervising such projects.
He was super innovative too, and like they even had his team design the Game Boy Color rather, which is why Metroid 2 got a special palette coded into the system. That blue and orange palette is special specifically for the game.
Yeah, people often ask, how are you running Metroid 2 in color? It's because it was designed to utilize the color features of future consoles.
Gunpei Yokoi passed away in a tragic car accident. Someone else was stopped at the side of the road, and he got out of his car to help them and was unfortunately hit. He was the head of Nintendo R&D 1, which is one of their most like important divisions.
Yeah, I think they were actually they were planning to develop a Metroid for the 64, and due to that, they couldn't do it. And Metroid, I think Metroid Prime took a lot of not really like assets, but a lot of direction from the team that was working on what would have been Metroid 64 before.
I would have liked to see the other M that Other M was going to be before Sakamoto got to the cutscenes. Because I feel like that would have been a pretty dang great game.
Honestly, I don't think it would have been that much. I get the impression that this was kind of rushed, that they just wanted to make a 3D Metroid game themselves, kind of. And like once they were done with it, they just didn't. There are a lot of gameplay bugs, like the aforementioned speed booster interruptions and the turning of the controller when grappling. And there are some instances in what we refer to as the pixel hunt, where actually the pixel you're supposed to hunt for can't be targeted if you go too quickly. So you have to, like, you'll be clicking on it like 5 times before it goes through. And it's just not loaded yet. And those are the kind of issues that just kind of take time to deal with.
it really is kind of crazy that Metroid sees like the ups and downs that it does. Like, it's one of Nintendo's like most well-known franchises, along with its peers, but it's the only one of like the big Nintendo franchises to go through multiple significant dark ages. There was no new Metroids between Super and Prime/Fusion, and then there was no new Metroids from Other M until Samus Returns. Federation Force was a spin-off game.
A bunch of 7-year periods between games.
Is the Queen fight coming up now?
In a bit. Yeah, yeah, he's just leaving the sector pretty soon.
Like, that should be the next major boss, right?
I believe so.
This was one of the sections that frustrated me most from the gameplay perspective, because they expect you to remember the power bomb that you did once in the tutorial, potentially like 10 hours ago or more, depending on how long you're actually taking to play the game, especially with all the cutscenes.
And people eventually figure it out due to the fact that it's literally the only thing you can do. But it's frustrating for sure. Ironically, when you finally use it, it's literally one room away from the sole survivor of the space station. Whoops.
You know, I almost wouldn't have even been mad if, like, you set off the power bomb, finally escaped to the Queen, and then, like, she was just dead in the other room. Like, Adam was right all along. You're like, oops.
You know, one funny quirk about the interaction with the weapons and humans in the game, like during the fight, where you're kind of fighting along with Anthony. If you drop bombs, he'll actively dodge roll to avoid them.
Huh.
And I think his beam actually does damage to it. I'm not 100% sure, but it seems like it. So that's nice. It's just really weak. Unless it's used on you in the back. Then it just one-shots you.
Ooh, that's a lot of bugs.
Yep. Whenever people are first running this game, they try to run through that hallway. Actually, no, that's still the best strat, because you want to charge a Shinespark to just pass over the vines in the next room. Unfortunately, those key hunters in the room before, they're set up in a way that even if you're just holding up the entire time, you'll still sense move away from them if they attack in a certain way.
More of those little helicopter turret guys.
Yeah.
I haven't seen them in a while.
Yeah, because you can one-shot them with Wave Beam now. And there's the deleter. Doesn't say he's the deleter, but he's literally the only one left alive until
That's
he
not
got
Anthony.
killed right there. Well, allegedly left alive. Yeah, the only clues of that are through cutscenes that Samus herself didn't personally witness, nor was it on camera.
All right. Oh, I thought that was the queen fight room.
Now we got some Rinkas to do with first. So this is sort of Turian. MB is in here. Unfortunately, those Rinkas can actually block some of your seeker shots.
That's annoying.
Yeah. It doesn't... If you do the room in certain ways, it doesn't usually happen. But some runners have had struggles with them. There's a really tricky trick that no one really goes for, where you can do a spring ball and go into first person midair, and you can target Madeline through the window from halfway across the room. It's pretty sweet, but basically impossible. There's no like setup for it. You just have to be consistent at targeting and kind of be in the right, correct position. Now dealing with these Metroids is really tough your first time through, because it spawns one Metroid, and then a while later it spawns two Metroids, and then it eventually spawns three. But that's not based on whether or not you destroy the previous ones, the previous batch. It's just based on time. So if you don't kill them immediate, you're in trouble. And as you can see, they're really inconsistent to freeze. And if you don't know exactly what you're doing and how to manipulate them to attack so you can freeze them, well, you just gotta keep trying and erroring until it works. And then there's a kind of tough quick kill on the queen herself when she exposes these purple crystals on her head and neck. You can aim at the frontmost one, and then at the backmost one, and then at the center one, and it'll destroy it in 3 sets of missiles. 3 supers, basically. But that's really hard to do, and well, I mean, it's not super hard to do. You kind of got to be close up, but it's tough to pick a specific target. Because they're so close together, and you're getting fire shot at you all the time, or just rammed.
Yeah, it seems fun.
Yeah, there's also an issue, even though they're seeker missiles and they lock onto the target, I believe in this fight specifically, they don't move when the target moves. So if you fire missiles and then the queen moves, they just go straight past.
That's goofy.
Straight past the crystals.
Alright, I do believe it is time.
Yeah, it's time to chase MB into a room, or chase Madeline into a room to get cornered by MB. Oh, right, the grapple into the stomach. So yeah, this much is obvious. You're supposed to do this, and then, well, grappling into the mouth is obvious, and then you suddenly can fully charge your power bomb and set it off. And there's kind of a misnomer about the damage it deals. It just, I believe you just typically react quicker on hard mode because you know what to do. A lot of players think that it just drains more slowly. I don't think it actually does. And you can see he's trying to target her, but it's kind of inconsistent.
Yeah. 'Cause we got all the stupid other enemies in the way. Alright, guys. I believe this is where an any percent speedrun would end, right?
Yep. No.
Oh,
hard
Phantoon,
mode
you
would
still
stop
have to
here.
play Phantoon for
Yes.
any percent? I did not know that. I thought that it was technically not over. Or it was technically over then. Alright, so we just skipped all of the ending cutscenes, I believed. We are now back on the station where we can fight Phantoon, but that'll lead to the escape, I believe. So now we are starting cleanup. And we have to go get like 56% worth of items.
Now this is the highest concentration of fun, in my opinion. This is basically a 40-minute segment, 40-minute playground. You just do whatever you want with speed booster and power bombs and whatnot. Everything in your arsenal. I was thinking at one, if we were to ever get Other M into a GDQ, which I still think is technically possible, eventually, I think the best bet currently is to just start from the ship in cleanup and just get 100%. I think that's the most the most dense gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
And it really shows off most of what makes the game special, what makes the game good.
Yeah. I'm going to be submitting my Metroid 2 run from earlier in the marathon as my submission for AGDQ, or SGDQ this year. Hopefully that might be enough to finally get it in, showing it off in a marathon setting specifically with commentary and everything.
Yeah.
Hopefully they can see that like I'm already prepared for it, because it is really frustrating to have Metroid 2 be the only like beloved Metroid that's still never been in the marathon. But it makes sense that this is the most fun in the game, because this is where it's the closest thing to an actual Metroid game, where you actually get to have like routing, figure out the fastest way to go get all these power-ups that are hidden all over the place that you couldn't access before, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and just to clear up the confusion over the estimate,
What happened to him?
When the run originally was submitted, I think he thought he might have forgotten something. But when the one was originally submitted, his PB, Narudare's PB was significantly worse, and he has improved it a lot since then.
So what happened there? Like, he ran back because his speed booster got interrupted. The problem was that when he started running, he was shooting, and then like halfway through his run, he stopped shooting, and that changes Samus's animation, and for some reason, it causes collision with the ground. So it interrupts her speed booster. So you have to go all the way back and charge it again. So you're unable to access the main elevators at this time because this elevator right here is just inoperable. So
The TLDR for like the explanation of what is going on in the what is going on where Samus is right now is that the entire bottle ship is essentially condemned to be destroyed right now because of the whole like Metroid breeding program and all the stuff that happened with MB. And so because of this, like everything is shut down, the main power is off to all the areas, but there's a special relic thing that Samus needs to go get. You'll see what we mean. It's frustrating. I'm just gonna say this, it's frustrating.
That's fair. It's clearly important to her. I totally understand, and she says in a couple days it's scheduled to be destroyed. And apparently they're just early.
They didn't need to shoehorn her back into the frickin' Zero Suit just for the escape sequence.
True. Yeah, she does need the suit. It would be nice, though. Oh yeah, that room earlier, that circular room was one instance where you are technically holding the same direction for long enough to charge a speed booster. But the only reason you don't collide with things is because the camera's constantly circling around. So you can charge a speed boost by running in a circle, but only if the camera does so. That's kind of a silly quirk with the 3D design. So you can see here he's kind of switching between charging with the speed boost and just rolling around with the morph ball, depending on whether or not you can actually make use of the speed. Like, there are a lot of places you can Shinespark, but it's just ultimately slower because it's a really short spark, and there's a lot of downtime when you collide.
Yeah, the bonk animation in this game seems pretty real.
It's actually a pretty big deal in other Metroid games, but when you're first playing through, you don't really realize it until you start actually sitting down and timing things. For a long time, speedruns of Fusion use like 20% more sparks than it does now.
Yeah, and a lot of sparks have been replaced with space boost, just because it's moving at the same speed or sometimes even a little faster without the problem of the bonk animation.
Technically speaking, the base speed of Speed Booster is less than the Shine Spark, but it just gets cancelled out. Now he does a pretty. I've been noticing in his practice run I was watching earlier that he was doing a pretty consistent strat with these powerbomb doors, and he fights them with super missiles from kind of far away, and that seems to prevent them from doing any significant attacks. I thought I was noticing it would do a missile and then 2 supers or something similar. Generally, if you try to deal with them with a charge beam, they'll do a variety of attacks and they'll dodge a lot, and they do have a Crystal Flash ability where they can recharge their health, refill their health. So they're normally annoying. There's a faster way to deal with them using the lethal strike. In this case, it's less cinematic than dealing with them with super missiles.
That's funny.
Yeah, they just explode instantly when you jam your gun in their throat and fire. But it's a little tricky to actually get them in a position where you can lethal strike them. So now he's charging up another speed booster, and since he was continuously shooting, he didn't run into that issue he had earlier where it would interrupt.
That's such a strange little quirk.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that one room in Zero Mission where, when you're at the bottom of Norfair, where you'll drop the spark because it technically is like running off of a slope.
Oh, yeah.
Even though it doesn't really make any sense.
So he could have gotten this missile tank earlier, but you come through here anyway, like, after you get space jump now. So it's just slightly quicker to jump between the platforms here. A lot of rooms a lot of 100% runs have similar things where you can get things early, but you have a very slightly faster means to get them when you pass through a second time.
Mm-hmm.
There are some blocks that you could bomb that you can also just screw attack. And you don't have to wait for the bomb to go off. And lots of more fall through this area. They put a lot of short ledges that you have to hurdle over so that it prevents you from being able to shine spark in places. Unfortunately, it feels like it's just artificially slowing the game down.
Yeah, the game does not like the idea of sequence breaking, so they try and gate you pretty hard.
That's probably a significant reason why Metroid Prime didn't have Speed Booster. It's just really hard to allow a way to go fast in a game where you have to wait to load things. So there's a big trade-off in this game where, yeah, they have pretty long hallways and they're pretty slow to get through. Well, not necessarily slow. Your movement speed feels reasonably fast, but they're just such long hallways that they're not very interesting. And as a result, the loading times aren't very high. It's actually... There are very few instances where you'll actually notice the game stopping to load.
Yeah. I do think part of that is because the rooms get a little basic sometimes, though.
Exactly, yeah. Luckily, you don't have to do some series of battles this time on this elevator. And it's a lot shorter this time, because when you're battling the pirates the first time, the elevator just loops until you beat them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like one of those old Hanna-Barbera cartoons where you see the background just like, you see the same house go by like 8 times.
Scooby-Doo running.
Yeah. Yeah, he's getting through these powerbomb monsters in a fairly consistent time. If you try to go for the quick kill, sometimes it goes horribly wrong. And you wasted a lot of time. Usually not so bad, but if you're not used to it, if you can't get it consistently, then that's a backup I haven't seen before. So it's nice that it works for him.
This elevator is bound for the main sector.
Now we move on to, I believe Sector 3 is next. It doesn't technically matter what order you do these sectors in.
Mm-hmm.
You do have to go to the central hub regardless, but the main difference is by finishing off in Sector 1 is just like inches closer to the last door.
This elevator is bound for Sector 3.
It's too bad that there's not any sort of fusion style like inter-area shortcuts or anything.
Yeah. I mean there technically are, but they get destroyed. Like, you first enter Sector 3 through the back door from Sector 1, but it's no longer accessible. Which makes me wonder if there may be a use for the out-of-bounds in, like, later on in this sector, there's a room that I was talking about where you just get to a floor before it loads.
Mm-hmm.
And you could space jump around out of bounds. It's a pretty big room. I don't really know if you can transition rooms, though. If you can load other rooms. If you can, I wonder if there's a way to get to Sector 1 from the back door. But probably not. But at the very least, I think you would be able to skip one of the powerbomb monsters. And maybe a trip around a tube. You just have to actually figure out if it's possible first, and then figure out if it's actually faster.
Yeah, makes sense.
And aerial movement in general is kind of slow.
I can feel that.
These barriers, these laser barriers, are kind of annoying. You can't control too easily whether or not you're going to target them in third person.
Yeah, the third person targeting I hear can be a bit of a pain sometimes. it's not always the most accurate.
Maybe if you like pick a side to run on, maybe be more consistent, but I don't know, I haven't really looked into it myself.
So back when you used to run this game, did you run 100% or did you only run any?
Yeah, I ran 100%. It's actually my favorite category in this. Even though it's longer, it is more dense gameplay. It's more like the playtime to time ratio, I guess, is a lot higher in this.
Fair enough.
It's a big commitment, but it's kind of worth it. So this is the tube that got eaten by the fish earlier. Vorash, the fish.
It was this big.
Lava. Yeah. It was this big. It was scientific evidence. You could see the teeth marks.
I just love how effectively you literally just fish it right out of the lava.
Yeah. And the big significance of that broken tube is that to get across, you have to use the grapple beam to swing across. But that doesn't mean you could go outside the tube, just because it's broken completely apart, and you literally have to swing between the tube openings. It's completely, solidly blocked off on all sides. You can't even target the grapple point from this big section of the room.
That's goofy.
Yeah, which is why I kind of wonder if going out of bounds where you can might be able to get you to be able to skip that tube.
Mm-hmm.
Just needs more research. When I was trying to do some research on like what you could potentially do, I found a couple of rooms where only part of the room loads before you enter it, and then you go around the corner just in time to see it loading. And it's this room right here where you could actually get fully in before it loads.
Yeah,
in other rooms, you actually see it like across the room loading, but you can't get to it in time. There's one room in Sector 1, actually, where you could get through a door before the next room loads, and you'll technically be out of bounds. But once you pass through the door, the game stops you in place and brings up a loading screen. And then the room loads around you, and you continue. and if you look really closely at some of the doors, when you're passing one way through the door, they're actually they're positioned slightly off in some cases.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, just by like pixels or something, you could sometimes see through the door frame, but you can't really get through.
I do wonder what the dev timescale was on making this.
Same. There are just a lot of things like that where I think we can use this, but I don't know how. It's a big reason tool-assisted speedrunning is going to help a huge deal, I think.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of untapped potential to help the game.
Yeah, no one's had the patience yet. Because it's just a lengthy game. It takes a long time to get to interesting places where you could do research.
If you were to try and submit just the post game as a category, what would you call it? Like you were talking about, like trying to get it into a GDQ would be just the post game.
I guess Epilogue 100%. Because it would be less than an hour, which is enough time. It's short enough to feature. Like, I always felt like, I've always felt conflicted. I've always felt Other M should be offered, should be submitted every GDQ, but at the same time, it's not ready to be accepted until it's like an hour and a half or something.
Mm-hmm. I'm still just stuck forever campaigning for mine until I get in. We've had multiple different runners submit it. It's just Metroid 2 is cursed.
Yeah. Yeah, if anything, I think it needs to get into a GQ eventually, just so that it gets enough attention for someone to finally come on board and break the game. I went to a GDQ in summer of 2014, and I literally went to PJ and said, "Can you touch my disc? It's like it really needs to be broken." Can you bless my disc with your curse? Summer Games done quick, yeah.
I'm trying to think if that was the year that I was there. Was that at the Crown Plaza?
Might have been. I ran Fusion there. I did one run of Other M in the practice room.
I might have been there 2015 and 2017 because I think I was year on, year off, year on.
It's expensive.
It's not horribly expensive. It just didn't really work out for me to go the following year.
Well, I guess it's more expensive for me because I've been to other marathons with smaller groups, and like they do marathons out of their own house, and we have sleepovers and junk. And,
yeah, they have marathons.
They share hotels.
Like Midwest Speed Fest. I've never been to one, but I know that's pretty popular. And that's a pretty small marathon, relatively speaking.
Yeah, and generally you could save a lot of money on on hotel arrangements because it doesn't take place, like they don't usually take place in big fancy hotels, so you're not compelled to stay and spend $300 on a room, you know? Even split a few different ways, it's just it's more than necessary in some cases. I'm pretty sure, I think for smaller marathons, my budget is like $200, and for GDQ it was over 500.
Are you around, like, are you in the Midwest?
No.
Is SDQ better for you?
It's pretty much the same. It's just like the flight might be an hour shorter, but it's the same cost, you know? It's still a flight.
Yeah, no, I'm able to drive to SGDQ. It's a bit of a hike. It's about a 12-hour drive, but it's still manageable.
And it's also a longer marathon, so you're paying to stay for longer most of the time. Like if you want to stay the whole week, that's a lot of nights at the hotel.
I was able to split it reasonably. The only problem I had was I forgot to budget for food, and so I had to eat like trash the whole weekend.
Yeah.
Or the whole week, rather.
The nice thing about online marathons is you could eat normally. So this is a really out-of-the-way missile tank. You can see another room from here, and it's not like there's any glass walls or anything. It's just completely invisible walls and invisible barriers that you can't pass through, extending high above the guardrails.
Oof.
All over the main deck in Sector 1 there are a bunch of railings that are just infinitely tall, even though they're graphically only like 3 feet.
This does not surprise me. Like, even though I don't think that Retro was the one that ported them, like the Prime Trilogy versions, or even like the later versions of Prime having that huge orange wall on the landing site just so you can't get early space jump. Like, them trying to stop sequence breaking does not surprise me in the slightest.
Now, there's one instance of a loading screen.
Yeah, there was another one earlier too, going into the room with the rising and falling of water.
Yeah, they're very brief. Like the longest section of loading is 5 seconds, and most of them are much less, like a second. Of course, added up over a 3.5-hour run, it's gonna be lengthy, but compared to earlier consoles, it's not that much. When I revisited Super Metroid after a long time, it astounded me how long those door transitions actually are.
Oh god. Especially when you misalign one.
Yeah. There are some oddities with the loading as well. In some cases, it's faster to slow down in a room in order to prevent the loading screen from coming up, because it'll load fast enough to open up the door before you get there, but if you get there before it's loaded, then it'll just load all of the assets before it lets you continue. I think it actually costs more time to get there early.
Remind me what full counts are going to be again?
It's going to be 9 energy tanks. It looks like it's got 3. I think he already has the 3 reserve, whatever the equivalent is called in this. It's going to be 80
boosters.
missiles. Yeah. 5 Excel charges, but they're not like visible on screen, unfortunately.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I just meant amp. I was just curious.
He does, just in case, he checks at once he's finished collecting things, and you'll see on the pause menu, it'll show 100% for sector 1, 2, and 3 in the main deck.
That's good. Sector 4 was the desert, right? Is there not items in there?
That's part of sector 3. There are only 3 sectors in this.
How does this game end up so long with 3 sectors?
Yeah, indeed. That is the mystery.
I like how they're still telling you that missile tanks increase missile capacity after the credit roll.
True.
Like, is this really necessary?
So in case anyone's just joining us, missile tanks increase missile capacity.
By 1, mind you. So we still need to find 12 more to hit 80 missiles.
We'll let you know next time when he collects another missile tank. And the 10 other times. Well, we won't, but the game sure will. So we have this kind of gauntlet-like room. You go in and collect this missile tank, and that'll spawn a couple of waves of pirates. And you powerbomb these. And you just screw attack these ones.
I will admit this, at least it seems like the screw attack is reasonably powerful in this game. The screw attack in Samus Returns was depressing. The fact that it was
really
like you had to hit with an enemy more than once with the screw attack to kill it. Like even just a normal enemy is like, I don't know about that.
And then another power bomb. I believe that finishes them off. Fun fact: in the original Metroid, they had screw attack in that. It generally didn't do a set damage. It just insta-killed enemies. Except on bosses, it does 1 damage.
Yeah, it just gives most enemies though.
But in this, I think it does a certain amount of damage, because you can whittle down an enemy's health with a screw attack, even if it doesn't one-shot them. There's several enemies that are resistant to it, though. Oh yeah, screw attack into the final boss is actually really satisfying if you can do it, but it's really tough to pull off. I don't think he actually goes for it in this one, in this run. So, once again, you're holding right the entire time, so you can speed boost, even though technically you're running in a circle.
I don't know why. For a second, I thought he just rolled right off the platform instead of grabbing the missile tank.
Nah, he got it. He's good. So there's this slope here that you kind of gotta... you gotta use a super missile to open this hatch. And it is possible to use the space jump to get up by jumping sideways off the slope. Because if you try to hold back, it doesn't let you jump backwards. You have too much forward momentum. But by going sideways, it lets you do that, and it just cancels your forward momentum, so you can space jump backwards and just inch your way back up the hill. It's kind of obnoxious to do. It's reasonable to just... it would be preferable if you got the speed booster going up the hill first try, but, you know, things happen. You have to come back up the hill because there's unfortunately no way to blow up the hatch and then grapple this point behind it.
Alright, just 9 more pickups to go. Unless he's missing an Excel charge or something that we can't see. Phantoon is one of the really cool fights in this game, so that's at least something to look forward to as a final boss.
Yeah, I think he's got another energy part to find as well. This missile tank is kind of tricky to find. The unfortunate thing about the map in this game is that it's all top down, so you'll pass right by missile tanks and you'll be like, where's the missile tank? It's usually like in the ceiling or in the floor below or in a completely different room or something. It's really confusing. Pretty tricky to actually get 100% without guides. Even though they're marked on the map, it's pretty deceiving. You can literally see some tanks and just be unable to collect them. This is a kind of nice trick. There's a morph ball tunnel that also leads here, but you could just Shinespark up and you'll get enough height to just space jump the rest of the way. Unfortunately, in this game, kind of similar to the Metroid Prime series, they cap the height of your space jump. So you could infinitely space jump, but not gain more height from it. playing it a bit safe here, you can technically Shinespark straight up next to this missile tank, and you can shoot the hatch down, and then immediately after you could go back into a space jump to actually reach the tank. But it's really tight timing, and it's really tough to pull off consistently. But that's a really good safety strat to just spark up to the platform instead via terminal.
Oof.
This room is so awful. You have to speed boost through here, and all the while you have to destroy these puffers that'll respawn if you leave the room.
Reminds me of that one room in Fusion.
Yeah.
With the frickin' Genesises, where they'll interrupt your speed booster with their drool.
I didn't know there were Sega Genesis. That explains so much.
I didn't say Sega Genesis. The Genesis is their name, though. That's actually the origin for that one mini boss in AM2R.
Yeah, those are probably one of the most menacing creatures in Fusion. Makes sense they would make a boss based on it.
Which kind of sucks. Like, I feel like they were almost wasted because they just literally just live in the walls and floors. They look like xenomorphs, and they're literally the only thing that they can threaten you with is their drool.
Same though.
Today I learned that Jagger G has acid drool.
I drink a lot of soda with phosphoric acid.
Must give you some wicked heartburn.
Nah, I just, like, my stomach lining is built for it. You really don't want to activate that ball shooter.
Yeah, I bet. That probably sends you all across the map.
Basically, to the beginning of the tunnel, he just came through. Or the series of tunnels.
Or is it a troll, or is it just a speed thing?
It's a shortcut, but it's a shortcut to where you've already been and don't need to go anymore. You take it earlier in the game. You have to roll all the way to the left there to build up a Shinespark straight up off this hill. And that'll get you both this missile tank as well as access to a shortcut to another area.
Nice. Alright, just one more missile. And we're full on E-tanks now too, right?
I don't.
I count 8 there, but I
might
guess
be the last. Oh, this is the last missile tank. There's another energy part.
I mean, are you sure? Like, the last energy part gave him a full tank, so there would need to be at least 4
That
more.
might be a full tank. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there would have to be a full tank. I don't know where else it would be, though, unless it's on the main deck. It looked like he had all 3 of the sectors 100%ed.
This elevator is bound for the main sector.
Oh, I think I know where it is. Okay, yeah. He should be good to go now. Yeah, it's on his way to the end. I think there's a room at the end of this hallway, that locked door in the background. Oh. Okay, he didn't get a chance to... I think that flash attack will actually deflect shots back at you. He might be missing the tank.
Uh-oh. Does he realize he's missing the tank?
Let's see.
Because he can't get that once he fights Phantoon, right?
Let's see, is he in the he should be in the Discord, right? I'm looking at the wrong channel.
You know, he's in the main Discord, not the commentator Discord.
There he is. Okay.
So if you're concerned that he legitimately is forgetting something, now would be the time to voice that. And I would say pretty quickly. I think you might be getting memed, Jagger. It looks like that there's an empty slot on his E-tank thing that might just be a tank that's not full.
That is a possibility. We'll find out once he gets... after this gauntlet section, there's a save station that'll refill all his health.
Yeah, look at it when he kills the thing, how like his HUD gets lighter. You can kind of see it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he's got them all.
Okay. Yeah, he just confirmed he does have them all. So yeah, there's these two Radosians again. You kill the first one with super missiles, and the second one just with a single power bomb. You could use power bombs on both of them. However, there's a long cooldown between power bomb usages.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of I think all of the enemies could be dealt with a single power bomb. It's just it takes too long, so you get to use a lot of other options. So Phantoon appears and is massive.
Welcome to the true final boss.
He's gonna be using charge beam mostly. Probably like there's kind of a first phase here where Phantoon is just gonna destroy all the glass around the room. That doesn't remove any collision, of course, it's a closed room, regardless. But it does allow to shoot through and hit the eye and actually damage him. So he's mostly going to be using super missiles. You could use power bombs. I think they're about as effective as super missiles. By far the strongest attack is Screw Attack, but as you can see, there are a ton of little green eyeballs flying at him constantly. And they just keep spawning, and he's only vulnerable to Screw Attack when he pokes his eye inside through this portal for some reason, even though it's like right there. But you have to be at full space jump height to reach it, and moving around in the air is pretty slow, and these eyeballs are homing in on you constantly. So you have to bob and weave between them and get to the eye before he does his little side swipe attack.
This is definitely, like, probably the most fun and involved boss fight in the game. There's a lot going on.
But the nice thing about mostly using beam shots and super missiles is you could get this lethal strike in, and it's really flashy and just a ton of damage to finish them off.
An interesting thought that I had is, like, maybe Phantoon is not, like, a single entity, but, like, actually just, like, a race of aliens that goes around finding, like, derelict ships. And so the reason why it was so much bigger in this one than in Super Metroid is because of how much bigger this ship was than the wrecked ship in SM.
That's a good point. So now we finally get to the tube that you have to powerbomb, obligatory in a Metroid game. It's really been a staple since Super Metroid.
Mm-hmm. This is stupid and dumb and stupid.
And finally picks up her artifact that we came back here for.
Surprise, it's Adam's helmet. And she feels the need to drop her suit. And for some reason, even though she can apparently in Other M put it back on and take it off like a Power Ranger, she refuses to put it back on. She can't hold it in one hand and then have her arm cannon in her other hand.
Might slip out. The Federation keeps their helmets very thoroughly waxed.
The Prime games and Other M had a difference of intent in terms of art style, so I can see why people might think that the Prime games looked better, but in reality they just looked different, and their look has aged a little more classically.
They did a fantastic job of working with what they had. Even though the Prime textures are so low res, they blend in so well that it doesn't matter.
Please evacuate the facility immediately.
And now in the Zero Suit section, you can slide by hitting jump. Specifically at certain points in these hallways. Thank goodness he didn't fall in that final troll room. It's so easy to jump at the wrong time and just plummet. I've seen her run pretty much die to having to climb back up like 3 times after falling. Like, he's still finished, but it cost a lot of time.
The unfortunate thing about this escape is that, like, it's flashy, but there's not really a whole lot going on.
Yeah.
You just kind of run through the rooms.
And at a certain point down that slope, you lose control and you just run straight to the ship. And generally, we stop timing as soon as the cutscene starts, One of the runners
Sorry for keeping you
stops
waiting.
time as soon as she taps the screen for the last time. It's a nice
Go home.
You baby babes.
coordination to it.
Hello.
Regardless, like, it's not so competitive a game that we worry over the 3-second difference. As long as we know that the difference is there, we could just make calculations.
But all right, that is Other M 100%. That's probably going to put the marathon way ahead of schedule now because of the original estimate was so much more conservative than the PB that he was able to get it down to.
Which is 3:35:58 now.
And apparently that's a PB based on what he's saying in the chat.
Yep.
And that is 100%.
Perfect. Congratulations.
Perfect.
Congratulations.
So I hope you enjoyed some of the flashier elements of the gameplay. It's something we didn't really get to feature in previous showings in the Metroid Marathon. We generally just went with the shortest categories we had, because they were shorter. But
Yeah.
this is
It's hard to get people to watch Other M sometimes. You really have to sell it as a speed game.
like I said, it's my favorite category, even though it's longer, like more amount of time playing the game. It's like
Sorry for
more.
dying of
It's more than hallways than the other categories. Movie time, yeah, absolutely.
Bonus game.
So what do we have up next on the schedule? Looks like man, I wanted to say what the game was earlier, but this takes forever to load. Metroid Fusion, 100% race, 4-way race. That's going to be really exciting. Less volatile, I think, than any percent, but 100% is a really tough category for Fusion. It's going to be interesting to see how these runners compare. There's going to be probably some back and forth and cleanup. So stay tuned for that.
Hope you guys enjoyed our commentary. Sorry if I got a little bit in and out at times. I've been fighting off sleep as the best I can. I have been up for like 28 hours. But, Jagger, it was good to get to commentate with you. It's been a while.
Mm-hmm. Same. Hope you get some good rest. Eventually.
I'll be up soon. I'm gonna try and not sleep for too long because I want to be around to help anyone else commentate if they need it. I took the whole weekend off for that specific reason, so. Oh, are we? Please don't tell me we're actually. No, please don't do this.
Play
Please.
all. Nah.
That was a meme. Don't do it.
You playing the best cutscene in the game?
Eagle was joking around and told him to put on the Other M movie mode for a while because there's nothing, because there's Fiesel's not around at the moment. And I'm like, please don't do this. Alright, but I'm gonna head off.
Alright, nighty night. An empty shell. Pretty good metaphor. For what? I'm not quite sure. I like how even the theater mode has a bit of trouble targeting the pixel hunt sections.
Get out the way! Man, can't see a thing in here. We gotta clear out. Where's the exit at? Duck. This ain't good. Well, only one thing to do, huh? Let's tear this thing up.
Wait, Anthony. Leave this one to me. Don't waste your plasma.
Samus, blast the eruption port to get the magma flowing. Use your super missiles.
I don't want to grow up. I'm a toy best kid.
What the? Samus, do you copy? Samus! Samus, use your plasma beam! What's your status?
He can't be!
Samus, do you read me?
the
man.
best.
You got no style. I think I gotta teach you a lesson about settling. Come on!
Anthony! Don't do it!
Come on!
Why am I still alive? A baby. Mother, time to go.
Okay, Samus. Everything's normal.
I awoke to the familiar voice of a
It
quarantine
was all a
officer.
dream.
Let's try sitting up, huh? Slowly now.
A dream. I had been reliving the tragic moments of my recent past. Thanks to the hyper beam, which was given to me somehow by the baby.
Okay, mates. So, thank you for following my run. And so, if you want to follow my channel, we're clear. So, voilà. So I thank you. Thank you for watching, and see ya. Stream is cut.